Okay, so thank you everybody for joining this session, which is the IMS stream. So this is the I think the fifth session we've had in this virtual conference so far, and this is the second day and the second session of the day. And it's everything you ever wanted to know about the IMS Catalogue, but were afraid to ask. So hopefully, if it's not covered in some of the material that Deepak's going to do for us today, then obviously you're more than welcome to ask questions throughout this presentation, and I will actually make sure that you can unmute yourself to ask that question in person and verbally during the presentation. So don't be shy. And just a background about Deepak. Well, he's definitely been over 20 years in IBM, and he's been an IMS product manager for over 13 years, and before that at least 8 plus the 13 years plus more on a senior technical developer and developer architect, I guess. And so without further ado, I'll hand you over to Deepak.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you all for joining this session. I'm going to be honest with you. The word everything, I'm lying here. It's not everything. I had everything up until last night. I was reviewing it, and then I had like 80 slides in this presentation. I said, there's no way I'm going to do these 80 in 60 minutes. And so I took out a section called catalog enablement, how to implement the catalog. So I took that out because, you just would not be able to, we would not be able to cover that in the 60 minutes. So, but if you are looking to implement the catalog and you'd like me to do that session, just reach out to me and we can set up a WebEx and I can go over that with you. My name is Deepak Kohli. I'm the IMS product manager, and there's my email ID, deepak@us.ibm.com. So feel free to reach out to me if you're looking to implement the catalog. This is session 5J. So let me go ahead and get started. Here's the agenda. The first thing I want to start out is clearing the confusion about the IMS catalog. Whenever I talk to people that are first starting out on this journey of the IMS catalog, I always find that there's a little amount of confusion. And I'm going to clear that up, and then I'm going to jump into the IMS catalog and give you an overview of the catalog. Actually, it's a little more than just an overview. And then we'll talk about the different ways to configure using the IMS catalog. And also, we'll talk about some housekeeping for the IMS catalog. Once you implement the catalog, there are things you're going to have to do that you didn't have to do prior to implementing the catalog. So I'm just labeling that as housekeeping for the catalog. So that's what I'm planning on covering in this particular presentation. So let's start off with clearing the confusion. There's the IMS catalog, there's the IMS directory, and there's an IMS repository in IMS, right? And I always find that people are not clear on what the differences are between these three. I call them the three stooges, right? So let's talk about the differences between the catalog, the directory, and the repository, and let's clear up that confusion. So the catalog is not the IMS repository. Those are two different things. Why is it different, or what's different about them? Well, first of all, the IMS catalog is implemented as an IMS database, whereas IMS repository is simply a vSAM dataset. So that's the first difference between the two, is the implementation, right? The IMS catalog is implemented as an IMS database. IMS repository is not an IMS database. It's a data set. It's a vSAM data set. Now, what's in these two separate entities is also different. In the IMS catalog, we have what's called metadata. Metadata is a fancy word for data about data. So what we have in the IMS catalog is data about your databases, your DBDs, if you will, and your PSBs, right? So it's the database structure, the segment definitions, the field definitions, the data types for the various fields, the encodings, the redefines. That's all housed in the IMS catalog. The IMS repository, on the other hand, is stuff you would use for your mod blocks gen, right? Your program definitions, your transaction definitions, your application input-out messages. That sort of information will go in the repository, right? So the catalog is database or PSB-related metadata. It's an IMS database. The repository is your mod blocks, resources, your application input-out messages, and it's a VSAM data set. So right up front, I want to make that very clear. The IMS catalog is not the same thing as the IMS repository. Those are two separate things. Now, what about the difference between the catalog and the directory? Well, the catalog has metadata, as I mentioned earlier, and that information is primarily used by Java programs, right? Also, going forward, when you implement DDL, the catalog is also used by DDL, right? What's in the IMS directory is the same information that's in the catalog, but it's in a different format. It's ACB blocks, right? So it's the same information. In essence, it's the same information that you have in the catalog, but it's in a different format. ACB blocks are the runtime blocks that are used by IMS, right? Your DBDs and your PSBs. That's what's in your IMS directory dataset. And also your IMS directory dataset is a PDSE, whereas the IMS catalog is a database. Specifically, it's a HAL-DB database, right? So those are the differences between the IMS catalog and the IMS directory. And by the way, the IMS directory is implemented when you implement IMS managed ACBs. If you don't implement IMS managed ACBs, these ACB blocks that are in the IMS directory then reside in an ACB library. That's when you don't implement IMS managed ACBs, right? So very, I want to clarify that confusion up between the catalog, the directory, and the repository. Three separate entities within IMS. So hopefully that clarifies up the confusion. Okay, that said, let's talk about the catalog. Let's start off with an overview. So first question, what is the IMS catalog, right? So the IMS catalog was introduced in version 12 of IMS. Right now we're up to version 15, 15.3 specifically speaking. And it was introduced in version 12 and was optional back then, and it is still optional. You don't have to implement the catalog today, but eventually you will have to. But for now, it's still optional. It was introduced back in version 12. I like to refer to it as a system database. As I mentioned, it's a database. And there are different types of databases in IMS, right? There's HDAM, there's HIDAM, and there's DEDB. So what type of a database is the catalog? It's a HAL-DB database. A HAL-DB stands for High Availability Large Database. Basically, it's a database that can be partitioned, right? And it contains IMS database and application metadata. And as I mentioned before, metadata is just a fancy term that says it's data about the data. And in terms of the catalog, it's data about your DBDs and your PSBs, right? So whatever's in your DBDs, whatever's in your PSBs, and also COBOL copybooks, or if you're one of those customers that uses PL1, then it's PL1 includes. That sort of information goes into the catalog, okay? So that's what goes in the catalog. Where was that metadata before the IMS catalog came on the scene? That's a good question, right? Where was that metadata before the IMS catalog came on the scene? Well, it was spread out. right? The database information of the DVD database information was in the DVD library where the DVDs reside, but the DVDs only had key fields or searchable fields, right? The remaining information about the fields within a segment that was not found in the DVD. Where was that information? Well, that information, that remaining database information, was in the COBOL copybooks of the PL1 includes. And you know, applications can have different mappings for one segment. So that was not in the DVD, it was in the COBOL copybooks of the PL1 includes. Now, by the way, Java, the ability to write IMS application programs in Java was introduced back in version 7. The catalog was introduced in version 12. So between version 7 and version 12, you know, where was that metadata that Java programs needed? Well, we had tools or utilities that we would give you that would create Java classes out of the PSB lib, the DVD lib, you know, and the COBOL copybooks. So the metadata was maintained separately in Java classes for Java programs, if you wrote Java programs in IMS, right? So this is where the metadata was. It was sort of all spread out, if you will, before the IMS catalog came on the scene, right? Okay, so we've gathered all this metadata and we've put it in one place, and that one place is the IMS catalog. And who is this metadata for? Who uses this metadata? Well, the biggest user of the metadata is our universal JDBC drivers for metadata exchange and discovery, right? So if you were writing Java programs and you were using our JDBC drivers or even DLI drivers, by the way, you can write Java programs and issue DLI calls. You don't have to issue JDBC calls. So if you were writing Java programs to access IMS databases, then Java needed to know, needed to have data about your databases. So for example, if you issued a call to access IMS data, we would go out and get that data, and then we had to take that data and put it in a data type that Java recognizes, right? And that's why we needed this metadata. So the metadata in the catalog is leveraged by our universal JDBC drivers. And it allows you basically to you know, access IMS databases, right? And going forward, when you start implementing DDL, or when we'll require everybody to switch to DDL, the catalog is also required for DDL. So those are sort of the two major uses for the IMS catalog. There are other products that can also take advantage of the catalog. I've listed here some IBM products, but certainly any product out there that allows you to access databases, that allows you to have JDBC access, can now access IMS databases if you've implemented the IMS catalog. So just to give you an example, IBM has a product called InfoSphere Data Stage. Data Stage is an ETL tool, extract, transform, load. It's an ETL tool. And you can use Data Stage to access IMS data, extract, transform, and load elsewhere. You can use the Data Stage to do that, provided you've got the IMS catalog implemented, right? So this is another list of products that you can use. And these are IBM products, but I'm sure there are non-IBM products that you can also use once you've got the IMS catalog implemented. Then the other question we get from folks once they've implemented the catalog is they go, well, can I see what's in the catalog? And if so, how can I do that? Well, remember what I said earlier. The IMS catalog is a database, right? In any IMS database, how do you access that data? How do you look at that data? Well, you can issue DLI calls. That's one way to do it. And you can also, for any IMS database, you can issue JDBC calls or DLI calls in Java, right? And in version 13, we introduced native SQL, which is basically the ability to issue SQL from COBOL programs. So those are the three ways that you can access and look at the data within the IMS catalog. And of course, application and tooling can access the IMS catalog. And one big example is E4D, IMS Explorer for Development, can access the IMS catalog also. So you can see what's in the catalog using E4D, right? So are there cases where catalog is required, right? And that's another area where people are unclear. We keep saying the catalog is optional, but are there cases where the catalog is required? Yes, if you're accessing IMS data from Java programs, if you're planning on doing that, and there's more and more IMS clients that are doing that. I've got a client that I'm working with, actually two separate clients that I'm working with right now. They're writing Java programs that run on distributed platforms, and they come in over TCP/IP into IMS, and they want to grab the data and go back out to those distributed Java programs. But you can write Java programs within IMS to access IMS data. So anytime you're writing Java programs to access IMS data, then yes, you've got to have the IMS catalog implemented, right? Other features in IMS that we've introduced over the years, like database versioning, native SQL support, .NET access to IMS data, and then DDL. DDL requires that you implement IMS managed ACBs, and as part of the implementation of IMS managed ACBs, you have to implement the catalog, right? So those are the cases where the catalog is required. Now, I mentioned earlier that the catalog is an IMS database. In IMS, whenever you have a database, you've got to have a DVD that describes that database. And if you want to access that database, you've got to have PSBs. So what are the catalog DVDs and PSBs, right? So let's talk about that. The IMS catalog, as I mentioned, is a HAL-DB database. Specifically, it's a p-HIDAM/OSAM HAL-DB database. And we knew this. And by the way, let me just give you a little history. When we were designing the catalog, we said, okay, we're going to make it an IMS database. What type of database should we make it? And we knew over time that the catalog is going to grow. We've seen that with DB2. I think DB2 came on the scene in 1984. And look at the catalog, DB2 catalog then, and look at the DB2 catalog now. So we know that the catalog over time is going to grow. There's going to be lots of more information that clients are going to want in there. And so if it's going to grow, then we must have the ability to partition it, to manage it better. So our choices for partitioning the catalog was either make it a HAL-DB or make it a DEDB database. We couldn't make it a DEDB database because DEDBs are only available in the online environment, right? DEDBs are not available in an IMS batch environment. And so that's why we went with HAL-DB, and we specifically went with p-HIDAM/OSAM. Now, by the way, when we introduced the catalog, we said it's p-HIDAM/OSAM. There are clients out there that don't use OSAM, that use VSAM. That's sort of the standard in their shop, that every data set has to be VSAM. Well, and they asked us, why did you make it OSAM? Why didn't you make it VSAM? And the answer is quite simply this. VSAM stands for what? Very slow access method. I'm kidding, that's not what it stands for. But if you compare VSAM with OSAM, OSAM is fast. And so that is why we went with p-HIDAM/OSAM. Also, we gave it 4 different dataset groups. Dataset groups provide performance. So, you know, certain segments that are not going to be frequently used, you can put them in one separate dataset group. And then the other ones that are more frequently used, you can put them in a separate dataset group. So we, based on our crystal ball, looking into the future, we said, you know, some of these segments, we don't think they're going to be that frequently used. These segments are going to be more frequently used. So we divvied up the segments into 4 different data set groups, if you will. There is one secondary index on this catalog, and can be used to determine which IMS PSBs reference a specific database without having to process the entire IMS catalog. And that's why we had one secondary index. There's one unique feature about the catalog. HAL-DB databases require that they be registered with DBRC. In fact, not every IMS client uses HAL-DB databases. And this is one of the reasons that clients sometimes opt not to use HAL-DB, is because HAL-DBs have to be registered with DBRC. And there are clients that go, you know, in development and tests, we don't have DBRC turned on. We if a database needs to be recovered, we just, just lay out the fresh new image copy and we start from there. So we knew that. We knew that if we're going to make the catalog a HAL-DB, there are clients out there that don't use HAL-DB because they'd have to register with DBRC, and they don't have DBRC turned on in test and development. So for the catalog only, even though it's a HAL-DB database, we made DBRC usage optional. This is the only HAL-DB database that isn't required to be defined in the DBRC recons, right? And also, the other unique feature is that IMS can manage the allocation and creation of the catalog database datasets. So if you go in DFS-DF proc lib member in the catalog section, and you define SMS related parameters, IMS will automatically allocate and create the catalog database datasets for you if you would like to do that, right? You don't have to, but certainly. So those are two very unique features of the catalog database, right? IMS or the lab provides the DBD and PSB source code for the catalog database DBDs and PSBs. We also provide the object code for the catalog DVDs and PSBs. The DVD for the catalog is called DFS CD 000, right? CD stands for catalog, right? DFS CD 000. The secondary index, I mentioned there's one secondary index, and that's called DFS CX 000. So we give you these DVD source codes and object codes. And then what about PSBs? So we've got about 5 different PSBs, and they're listed right here. DFS CPL 00, that is used for initially loading the catalog. And the way you load the catalog is by running the catalog populate utility. And I'll talk more about that in this session. If you're looking to update the catalog, then you'll use DFS CP001. By the way, and I'll mention this again, who are the updaters of the catalog? Who can update the catalog? Well, there's the ACBgen and the catalog populate utility. That's one utility that can update the catalog. There's the purge utility that can update the catalog. And going forward, DDL will be updating the catalog. That's it. Those are the 3 updaters of the catalog. You, the IMS client, will never write programs that update the catalog. You shouldn't, right? And then we've got 3 other PSBs for read access to the catalog, DFS CP 000. That's when you're reading the catalog from a COBOL or a high-level assembler program, or DFS CP 002 for read access from PL1 programs, and DFS CP 003 for read access from Pascal programs. The one thing I should mention to you, and this is very, very important, when you enable the catalog, so you implement the catalog and you tell IMS, yeah, the catalog is now enabled in this IMS system, IMS will automatically attach PCBs for the IMS catalog to every one of your PSBs. So for each user PSB, we will automatically attach PCBs to the IMS catalog, right? This is when the catalog is enabled in your IMS system. And you may say, well, why is that important? Why do you care? And you may even ask, well, why does IMS do that? Well, we do that if under the covers, IMS, when a PSB is scheduled, for whatever reason, if IMS has to access the catalog, it can do that. So we automatically attach PCBs for the IMS catalog to each or every user PSB at runtime, right? And the reason you need to know that is that when you implement the catalog, you may want to size your PSB pools to be slightly bigger, right? So that's important. Okay. So so far so good. We know what the catalog is. It has metadata. We know when it's required. It's required mostly in 2 instances: when you're writing Java programs to access IMS data, or going forward, when we implement DDL, catalog will be required, right? We know the DBD names. We know the PSBs that are used to access the catalog. What about the catalog hierarchy? What does that look like? Well, here it is. Here's what the catalog hierarchy looks like. At the root, we've got a segment called the header segment. The header segment basically says what's underneath the header segment is either a DBD or a PSB. And if it's a DBD, then you'll see the DBD segment and all these segments underneath the DBD. If it's a PSB that's under the header segment, you'll see the PSB segment and all of these segments under the PSB. You'll notice that the names of these segments correspond to the macros that you code in the DBD. So you'll see there's a segm statement, a segm segment here under the DBD. So whatever you code on segm macros for segments, that's what goes in the segm segment under the DBD. There's an L-child segment here. And again, whatever you code in the L-child macro in your DBD, that's what goes in the L-child segment, right? So you can see here that these segments are just straight out containing information that you code in the corresponding macros, either in the DBD or in the PSB. You'll also notice here that these segments are color coded. Some are white, some are gray, some are green, some are blue. And then at the bottom, you'll see data sets, and they're labeled dataset group A, B, C, and D. And the reason for this color coding, as I mentioned earlier, is that we decided to implement the catalog as 4 separate dataset groups. So the blue segments will go in dataset group D. The green segments will go in dataset group C, and so on, right? And again, dataset groups have been around in IMS for decades, and they're there as a performance enhancement, if you will, for the database. And then there's one secondary index on this database, DFS-CX000, and then the target segment is DBD-XREF. And basically, given a PSB, you can see which databases reference that PSB. That's what that secondary index is used for. So that's sort of the physical hierarchy, if you will, for the catalog, right? Everything that I said on the previous page is sort of documented here for you. The root segment is a generic resource header. It indicates what's underneath it, whether it's DBD or PSB. And the catalog database segments correspond to the macro segments that you code in the DBD and PSB source. Now, one segment, that's the first child level under the DBD or PSB, is available for vendors or customer use. And that's called the DBD vend segment or the PSB vend segment. And that's where we store vendor information for that DBD. So for example, let me go back here. Under the DBD segment, there's that DBD vend segment. You see that? Similarly, under the PSB, there's a PSB vend segment. And we use that to store vendor or customers can use to use that segment to store information about that DBD in that segment. So for example, if you use BMC tools, BMC has a tool called PDF, Partition Database Facility. And when you use PDF, you have to code BMC PDF specific macros in your DBD. Well, that information will be stored in the DBD vend segment for the DBD, right? So those are vendor related segments, if you will. Okay. What are the catalog database dataset names, right? We mentioned that the catalog is a database. It's got four dataset groups. We mentioned it's HALDB, right? And so it means there's an index database. So what are those database dataset names? And I've listed them here. Remember, the catalog is a partition database. So for each partition, you have a HALDB dataset prefix. When you have a HALDB database, you have to define a HALDB dataset prefix, right? And we've got four dataset groups, so it's A, B, C, D. And then we've got a HALDB index, and so that's the X00001. And then in HALDB, you've also got something called an ILDS dataset that's used to dynamically update pointers, and that has the .L suffix, if you will, right? So that's sort of the naming conventions for the catalog database dataset names. Okay, so I think we've got a nice, hopefully you've got a nice understanding of what the catalog is, and it has metadata. But how does that metadata get into the catalog? How do you begin to populate the catalog? So here's what you've typically done prior to the catalog, right? You had your PSBs genned into the PSB Live. You had your DVDs genned into the DVD Live. And then for your online environment, you do an ACB gen, and you would take that information from PSB Lives and DVD Lives and build ACB blocks and put them in the ACB library, right? Okay, so if you're going to implement the catalog, then the first thing you do is you run what's called the catalog populate utility. And the catalog populate utility takes as input your ACB libraries. It decodes what's in the ACB libraries, decodes that, and then puts that same information, but in a different format, separated out into those segments that I showed you, and it puts that stuff into the catalog, right? So that's how you initially populate the catalog. That's how the information first goes into the catalog. You take what's in the ACB library, you feed that as input into the catalog populate utility, you run that utility, it reads the ACB libraries and then decodes that stuff and separates it out and puts it into segments in the catalog, right? And that's fine, but that's, that's not all of the information in the catalog, right? Remember, DVDs only have key fields and search fields. So how do you get the COBOL copybook information that has all the rest of the information about the segments into the catalog? So you can use IMS Explorer for development to import COBOL copybooks into the DVD. So the IMS Explorer can be used to import the COBOL copybooks. And when you import those COBOL copybooks, you now have these expanded DVDs or PSBs with that COBOL copybook information. Then you would do the PSB gens into the PSB library and the DVD gens in the DVD library. And then we provide a new ACB gen utility. It's called DFS3 UACB, DFS3 UACB. And what that ACB gen utility does is it takes the PSBs from the PSB library, the DVDs from the DVD library. It does an ACB gen and puts that ACB block into the ACB library, and it decodes the ACB blocks and also puts it into the catalog. And this way now, the ACB library and the catalog remain in sync going forward. Now, any changes you make into the PSB go into the PSB library. Any changes you make into DVDs go to the DVD library. And then you would use this new ACB gen utility that we introduced for the catalog in version 12 called DFS3 UACB. And it'll keep the ACB library and the catalog in sync. So that's how the metadata gets into the catalog and remains in sync with the ACB library, right? Okay, so I mentioned ACB gen, this new utility, DFS3 UACB, it's called the ACB gen and catalog populate utility. It does two things. It does an ACB gen, puts that ACB block into the ACB library, and then it invokes under the covers the catalog populate utility. It decodes that ACB and puts that same information into the catalog, right? This utility, DFS3U ACB, the catalog populate utility, and then there's something called the catalog purge utility. I'll talk about that later on. These are the three utilities that are the only updaters of the catalog. And of course, I mentioned this earlier, going forward, DDL will also update the catalog, right? The IMS online environment, IMS batch regions will never update the catalog data, right? IMS online and IMS batch regions will only retrieve, they'll only reread what's in the catalog, right? You will never write application programs. You should never write application programs to go in and manipulate the data in the catalog, right? This is your trusted online source for metadata for your catalog DVDs and PSPs. Yeah. Okay. Now, by the way, I'm about to get to what I call one of the most important things in the catalog that you need to understand is instances of members in the catalog. So if you've been sleeping, now's the time to wake up, if you will. So let me explain to you the instances, the notion about instances in the catalog. Let me go back to the previous page here. So here's an example where, you know, I've got an ACB library. It's got three databases in it, DB1, 2, and 3. And the databases, when they were genned in, they have a timestamp 0, and the database 3 has a timestamp of 0. Whoops, wait, hang on, what happened? Yeah, let me go back. Okay. Right. So when you gen the database 1, we added it to the ACB library and it has a timestamp 0. And we added it to the catalog, it has a timestamp 0. When you gen database 2, we added it to the ACB library, it has a timestamp 0. And in the catalog, it is a timestamp 0. For database 3, when we genned it, we added it to the ACB library and we added it to the catalog with timestamp 0, right? But later on, when you make another change to database 3 and you use the DFS3 UACB to do an ACB gen, we'll add that to the ACB library and we'll add the new version of database 3 with a new timestamp 1, right? We'll replace the old timestamp in the ACB library. But for the catalog, we'll add another member, another instance, if you will, for database 3. So this is the uniqueness about the catalog, and I want to make sure that you're very, very clear about this. Every time you do an ACB gen for a PSB or a DVD using DFS3 UACB, we'll add it to the ACB library. We'll replace that member, but in the catalog, we won't replace that existing member. We'll add a new instance of that member. So if I were to gen DB3 10 times, in the catalog, you'll see 10 instances with different timestamps in there. And so that's very, very important for you to understand. I think the reason they did that, at some point they were going to provide fallback capabilities, but then they didn't make any use of it. And now here we are living with the catalog, having multiple instances of DVDs and PSBs, right? So when an application, so how is this used? When an application request is made, for example, to read DB3, IMS looks at the ACB library and says, okay, DB3 in the active ACB library, DB3 has a timestamp of 0. So it goes out to the catalog and it retrieves DB3 for timestamp 0, and that's what gets used for metadata purposes, right? If you were to do an online change and then make DB3 timestamp 1 to be the active one, then when the application issues a call for DB3 and we need to get the metadata, IMS looks at the active ACB library and says, oh, it's timestamp 1 is the active one. So it goes to the catalog and retrieves the metadata for DB3 with timestamp 1. So that's how IMS uses to determine, which instance of that database of PSB gets used, right? So that's very, very important for you to understand that. And the reason that's very important for you to understand that is because, you know, after some time, you want to go in and clean out the old instances that are no longer used. And you do that by running the purge utility, the catalog purge utility. It can go in there and clean out the older instances of the catalog, right? We also introduced with the catalog a GUR call. It's a DLI call. It's restricted to be used with the IMS catalog. And basically what the GUR stands for, give me the record, give me the entire record. So it's the root segment followed by all the segments underneath it. Functions like a get unique for the root segment followed by a series of get next within parent calls. And it returns the entire database record in one call. And the idea is that when IMS is reading the catalog, it saves overhead of issuing a get unique call and then doing a get next within parent, get next within parent to retrieve all the segments under the root. The data is returned in an XML format, right? And the XML schemas are included in the ADFS sample data set, right? Okay. So again, I've mentioned this before. Was there a question?
Actually, I was just going to say, Deepak, on the new GUR call, DLI, can you do a COBOL BMP to do that, to access that?
No,
no.
It's really just restricted for catalog database access.
Yeah, but for, can you actually do a COBOL program to do that GUR call? No.
Yeah, but
because for that browser that we're talking about.
That's right. Just for read purposes, yeah. But the data is returned in an XML format. Yeah. Will you be able to process that XML format in your COBOL program?
Well, it will just be for read purposes, won't it? Just to say what's in it.
Yeah, you could.
Okay.
You could do that. Yeah. If you're willing to process that XML, yeah, absolutely. We use it internally when we're accessing the record, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I mentioned updaters of the catalog. Who are the updaters of the catalog? I mentioned that, but here it is again. The catalog populate utility is used to populate the catalog, so it's an updater. When you run the catalog populate utility to set up an IMS managed ACB environment, you have to run the catalog populate utility with managed ACBs equals setup, and you have to use a load PSB DFS CPL00, and the catalog populated utility will read the ACBs and then it'll build the catalog for you. It'll build the directory data set, the staging directory data set, and all that stuff. You don't have to use the catalog populate utility to create IMS managed ACBs. You can use the catalog populate utility simply to create the catalog. In that case, you would not code up managed ACBs equals setup, right? And then DFS3 UACB, I mentioned this already. It keeps the ACB library and the catalog in sync. So this is another updater of the catalog, if you will. The catalog purge utility, here it is. The module name is DFS3 PU10. And this is a utility that can be used to remove the older instances in the IMS catalog. And this utility had a problem with it a while back where it could only run when IMS was down. We fixed that. It can now run as a BMP job. So this utility can run online now, right? And of course, don't forget, going forward, when you implement DDL updates the catalog, right? And I truly believe, people have asked me, look, I'm not planning on doing Java programs accessing IMS database. So do I have to implement the catalog? And then my answer to them is, look, somewhere down the road, you're going to have to implement DDL. You're going to have to stop doing PSB gens and DVD gens. You're going to have to implement DDL. And so let's get ready for that. Start implementing the catalog and then start implementing IMS managed ACBs. So that's my advice to almost every IMS client out there. So let's talk about catalog configurations. Here's what we've got out there today. We've got a whole slew of IMS customers out there. Some the catalog is not implemented yet, right? Some catalog is implemented, but IMS managed ACBs is not implemented. What that means is they've got the catalog implemented, but for ACBs, they're still using ACB libraries, right? Some clients have been doing this for two reasons. One, they wrote Java programs that access IMS data, and so they implemented the catalog, but they haven't implemented IMS managed ACBs yet. Then we've got clients that say, look, I'm going to implement IMS managed ACBs, but I'm going to do it in a two-step process. I'm going to first implement the catalog. I'm not writing Java programs to access IMS data. I understand that, but I'm going to implement the catalog, right? Enable it, make sure there's no problems, make sure I feel comfortable. And then I will implement the rest of the IMS managed ACBs infrastructure, right? So those are instances of clients that have implemented the catalog, but not IMS managed ACBs. And then we've got clients that have implemented IMS managed ACBs. So they've got the catalog implemented, they've got the IMS directory implemented. So IMS is using the directory and not ACB libraries, right? So those are the three types of IMS clients out there. One where the catalog is not implemented, one where catalog is implemented, but IMS managed ACBs is not. And then the third type is where IMS managed ACBs is implemented, right? So IMS catalog implementations in a non-IMS managed ACB environment. Let's talk about that. So you don't have IMS managed ACBs implemented. You're about to implement the catalog, right? So let's talk about that. So if you are a non-IMS managed ACB environment, you're about to implement the catalog, you have a choice, right? We give you flexibility. You can use one catalog for each IMS system, or you can use one catalog for all of your IMSs in an IMS Plex, right? So we give you that flexibility. But each IMS system can be linked to only one IMS catalog, regardless of what configuration you've got going. So let me give you some pictures here. So here's an example. I've got 4 IMSs in an IMS Plex, IMS 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're sharing the ACB libraries, right? And now I'm going to implement the catalog. Now, this is a non-IMS managed ACB environment. I'm simply implementing the catalog, right? So what are my choices here? Well, you would implement a shared catalog because you're sharing the ACB library. So you would create one shared catalog for all 4 IMSs. And in the DFS-DF startup ProcLive member, in the section catalog, you say catalog equals yes. We've enabled it, right? So that's one configuration. Another configuration might be you've got 4 IMSs, IMS 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you're not sharing the ACB library, right? This is an IMS Plex, but you're not sharing the ACB library because you didn't want a single point of failure. Maybe you're one of those clients, and that's fine. So each IMS has their own ACB library. It might be cloned ACB libraries, but nevertheless, each IMS has its own ACB library, and that's fine. We have clients that do that. So when you implement the catalog, here are your catalog configurations. Because the ACB libraries are, each IMS has its own ACB library, you would now implement a separate catalog for each IMS system, right? Now, this is an IMS Plex, ladies and gentlemen. This is an IMS Plex, which means all 4 IMSs are probably doing data sharing, and they've all got one recon. But I've got 4 separate catalogs, right? And what's the name of the catalog? DFS CD 000. That's the DBD name. How do you register the catalogs to, how do you register 4 separate catalogs with the same DBD name in one recon? It makes it difficult. So the catalog has a facility called alias, where you can define aliases for catalogs. So here I've given the catalog associated with IMS 1 an alias of cat1, and the alias for IMS2 is cat2, and so on. So I've got 4 separate catalogs, one for each IMS system. And because it's in the same plex, they're sharing the recon, I've assigned the aliases, if you will, right? And again, why do you need an alias for the catalog? The only time you need an alias is if you are doing data sharing. You've got one recon for your IMS plex, but each IMS is going to have its own catalog. And then how do you register each catalog to the recon? You'll use the alias. And that's why we have the concept of aliases, right? So that's a configuration. So those are the configurations of the catalog in a non-IMS managed ACB environment. Let's talk about an IMS managed ACB environment. In an IMS managed ACB environment, the IMSs don't use ACB library, they use a directory. And the directory houses ACB blocks. So again, if the directory is shared, then you'd have a shared catalog, right? If the directory is not shared, then you would have non-shared catalogs. Each IMS would have its own catalog. And again, you would have to set up aliases for each catalog, right? So those are the different configurations, whether you're using an IMS managed ACB environment or whether you're using a non-IMS managed ACB environment. And then finally, catalog housekeeping, right? There are things you're going to have to do once the catalog is implemented that you were not doing prior to the catalog, right? So first thing, keep in mind the catalog is a database, right? So you've got to do database management now for this very important database. What are those database management things? Well, review your database buffer pool definitions. Make sure you've got enough buffer pools for your catalog. And then you've got to perform routine management and maintenance of the catalog database, right? It's a database. It could take a hit. It could get an IO error. How do you recover the database? Well, how do you recover any database in IMS? You take an image copy, right? And then you do database recovery. So you're going to have to schedule image copies for your catalog. You're going to have to run pointer checkers. You're going to have to reorg the database, right? Catalog database will need to be reorged. If the catalog database is defined to the recon, then you can use HalDB online reorg. If the catalog database is not defined to the recon, then HalDB OLR can't be supported, and the reorg utility must be employed, and you have to take the catalog offline, right? So, and I already mentioned backups and recovery procedures. It's a database, folks. So you got to take image copies. And if the catalog is not defined to the recon, then recovery is limited. So we certainly recommend defining the catalog to the recon. Although you don't have to, we certainly recommend you do that, right? The other thing that I mentioned was the catalog purge utility, DFS3PU10. Periodically, you're going to have to run this and clean out the older instances in the catalog, right? So this is another thing that's part of the housekeeping that you're going to do. Okay, so that's my sort of overview, if you will, of the catalog. I hope this was helpful. As I mentioned, I had in this presentation a whole section on how to implement the catalog, but I figured there's no way we're going to cover that in this 1 hour, and I think I made that choice correctly. But if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to me. You have my email ID, and we can set up a WebEx, and we can help you, and we can walk you through it. And again, free of cost. We do this just to help our clients. Don't forget to provide your feedback about this session. This is session 5J, and I'll stop talking and turn it back. And if you've got questions, my bit is enabled for questions. So if you want to ask questions, go ahead.
Yeah, so Deepak, thanks very much for that. Just a quick word for everybody. If you want to ask a question, then please unmute yourself. We've got one question from Umesh so far in the chat, and that is, when will it be mandatory for the IMS catalogue? You've been mentioning for a while now that it will become that at some point. So is there any
Yeah, that's
expectation on that?
yeah. Let me address that question. That's a very, very important question. So we announced, I think it was in 2017, that at some point down the road, you're going to have to implement IMS managed ACBs. And we've been working with clients, and they have been testing IMS managed ACBs. They've been playing with it. They've come back with enhancements, and then we've made enhancements. In some cases, they found some bugs, and we've been fixing them. So we have about, I would say, 7 to 8 clients all over the world, spread out all over the world, that we've been working with. And out of those 7 or 8, there's 3 or 4 of them that are in production now with IMS managed ACBs. They've been in production for, there's one client that's been in production for over 2.5 years now with no problems. And so we just wanted to get a few more clients into production. And then we were going to make an announcement of when IMS managed ACBs will be required. I have been in meetings at the lab about this, and I think we're getting closer. And so I think later this year, we should hear an announcement about when IMS managed ACBs will be required. And of course, we would make sure that, you know, we give clients some time to implement that. It's not going to be, well, next month, make sure you've got IMS managed ACBs implemented. No, that's not how it's going to be. But I would foresee an announcement sometime this year coming out for when IMS managed ACBs is required. And again, I'm just giving you my crystal ball thing. There has been no, at the lab, at the IMS lab, we haven't yet decided when we're going to make this announcement. But I'm sensing we're getting closer to that. So don't run around saying Deepak said the announcement's coming this year. No, what Deepak said is he's sensing that we're getting closer to making an announcement this year. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very clear. So
yeah, okay.
And he says yes, Umesh says yes, it is clearer.
Good. Yeah.
And to kind of just ask a question about when you're installing the IMS Catalogue for the first time in your production, and you are not using the ACB managed. So you basically just put in the catalog in with the normal ACB. With the normal ACB, you know, not the new ACB utility, but with the existing one, that plus the catalog population, is that more of an overhead than doing a normal ACB online change? Or is it actually better?
No.
Any different?
So Dominic, when you implement the IMS catalog, you've got to start using DFS3 UACB.
Yeah.
And secondly, there isn't much of an overhead. There really isn't. And the DFS3 UACB basically is keeping the catalog in the ACB library in sync. Okay. So yeah. And in online change, there isn't much of an overhead. There isn't any additional overhead either. It's just keeping the DFS3 UACB simply keeps the 2 data sets in sync, the ACB library and the catalog database data sets in sync.
Yeah. Cool.
Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Now, one thing I want to point out really quickly, I know we're at the top of the hour. Here's a question. If the catalog goes down, and by down I mean you hit an IO error, or even you DBR the database, you could take it offline. You can DBR. What does that do to IMS? Does IMS stop working? No, not at all. In IMS, you can take any database, you can take it offline anytime. You can DBR the database. DBRing the database is taking the database offline. So the IMS doesn't stop working. What stops working? Well, if you take the database offline and you've got Java programs written up that want to access IMS data, now we may not be able to get to the metadata, and so they may have an issue, but IMS continues to run, right? So that's an important thing that I want to make sure everybody understands, right? So there's a problem with the catalog database. It doesn't mean IMS goes down. No, not at all. It's a database. You know, it can be taken offline for whatever reason. Okay. I just wanted to, that just popped up in my mind, and I wanted to mention that. I don't think I mentioned that in the presentation, so I wanted to mention it.
So that's a good point. And I think someone's also mentioned, are we available? Are the foils available? Will you be able to load them up to this agenda at all?
I already
this slide?
did. Yeah. I already loaded up my deck, and so that should be available to you all. Yeah, absolutely.
Deepak Ajay here.
Yeah, hi Ajay.
Yeah, hey, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Good.
Yeah, good. So a couple of questions, can I?
Please go ahead. This is your session. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, briefly, because it's we're at the top of the hour, but just briefly. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep. So the one thing which you have mentioned just now, like, if the catalog will go down, IMS will remain up. So it is something it is going to work differently as compared to DB2. That's what you are trying to say, that, right?
Well, okay. So really good question. Ajay, if you were in the room, I'd give you some chocolate. That's a very good question. So going forward, I said the catalog is required for DDL. Right. If the catalog goes down, right, and you're doing DDL, will you be able to do DDL?
Obviously, no.
No, obviously no. But IMS will continue to function. IMS won't crash. So yes, okay, that is a difference between DB2 and IMS. So if the catalog is down, you won't be able to do DDL. Your Java programs may not be able to access IMS data because the metadata is not available. But your legacy code that runs in IMS will continue to run without a problem.
Okay, so you are saying like a DLI or any IMS TM will functional as it is, but definitely whichever required metadata, that will not work.
Yes, that's right. So Java programs may experience an issue, and you may not be able to DDL because catalog is down. But yeah. And real quickly, let me just mention this, Dominic. I know we're at the top of the hour. I want you to know this. This is very, very important for everybody listening out there. The IMS Lab is implementing a utility called Catalog Maintenance Utility, CMU. And our objective is that if there's any change that needs to be made to the catalog, and the lab will dictate any changes that need to be made to the catalog, you will be able to make those changes without an outage to the catalog. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty powerful capability. We are currently now developing that utility, CMU, Catalog Maintenance Utility. So you'll see more about that coming up later this year. But yes, we have been putting into place, we've been working on an infrastructure that'll allow you to make changes to the catalog without an outage. So we're minimizing more and more a catalog going down, right? Does that make sense? Does that help?
Right. Yep, it does.
Excellent. And just briefly on that, just when you had some foils where you had like 4-way catalog, as in a catalog for one IMS, yeah. Mm-hmm. And if one of those IMSs goes down in a Plex, and it's just that one catalog that's going down, and the others are still up.
Yeah. So Dominic has a great question. I've got 4 IMS.
Just an answer. Yeah.
They're sharing a catalog. Well, one IMS goes down, 3 IMSs are still up. Well, the catalog's still up for those 3 IMSs.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Yeah, that's a great question.
So, Dominic, if time permit, can I ask last question?
Yeah, very brief.
Yes, it did. So, Deepak, like, we are on the verge to apply or working to enable this catalog on our shop. So what I understand from your discussion, it's like, down the line, there is a no U-turn for us. We have to have IMS catalog need to be implemented. And if we will face any issues or something, that we need to fix and move forward. There is a no way, IBM has any plan to revert those things. And again, as you mentioned, right, there is no timeline has decided, but yes, sooner or later, we need to implement. And if we will face any issues or will come across with any problems, we need to fix and move forward. So that is my understanding is correct, or something I am missing here?
You're on the money, 100%. Yes, absolutely. The train has left the station. This is not something the IMS lab or IBM is planning to go back on. I'm recommending to all my clients implement at least the catalog, if not at least implement IMS managed ACBs get ready. Eventually, you're all going to be doing DDL.
So
yeah.
definitely then, probably Dominic will touch base with you, and we required a one session on this, especially like, how we are going to do that. And we already have the plan. We just wanted you to review our, strategy, how we should go as Ram asked, right?
And I want to make that option of it. I want to offer that to every client that's listening on this call. If you need help, if you want us to review your process of implementing the catalog or implementing IMS Managed HTTPs, we're here to help. Reach out to me. You have my email ID.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, everybody, for those good questions. And we're over the hour, but thanks very much, Deepak. Really brilliant session there. Well, thanks everyone for your active attendance.
And please fill out the feedback. GSE UK wants to hear that. Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
That's session 5J. Thanks.
Bye.